I think the North Star is for kids to think that it's cool,
Yep.
and I think that kids are not gonna think anything is cool unless you find some sort of way to create a through line of, like, this is an NFT to this is a dope song without saying this dope song is an NFT.
Episode 1 of Invest in Music. We're here today with Daniel Allan. Daniel Allan is a leading artist in Web3. He's been featured on Time and Billboard. He recently dropped 25 auditions on Sound for his project called Criteria with Rio Cragen. And today we're here to talk about a really exciting announcement. Daniel just raised $1 million in the first ever artist seed round. We talk about his journey starting from playing tennis in college to releasing music on electronic music blogs, all the way up to what it means to be building a team in Web3. Daniel's an extremely close friend of mine, and he's someone to keep an eye out for. So without further ado, episode 1, Invest in Music with Daniel Allan. Let's go. All right, episode 1 of Invest in Music. We're here, new crib in Los Angeles. Daniel Allan, how we feeling, man?
Feeling great, man. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. For those who are tuning in, we are talking with the guy, Daniel Allan, the man, the myth, the legend. So Daniel, I mean, you and I have known each other for coming up on 2 or 3 years now at this point, huh?
Yeah, dude. I mean, when did we first meet? Was it like an Instagram DM, I
Yeah.
think, give or take?
I think
Something like
so.
that. Like I want to say it was like mid 2019, probably.
That's right.
Something like that.
Shout out to the plus plus community back in the day,
Wow, what a throwback.
connecting the dots.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, we're here today. You have some very special news to announce. So without further ado, why don't you tell us what we are going to be talking about here?
Yeah. So I guess today we're announcing the Daniel Allan Entertainment seed round, where raised $1 million to as part of a vehicle for a lot of my different ventures, led by Coop Records and Palm Tree Crypto came in, NoiseDAO, a bunch of other angels, and the whole point of it is for me to try to scale my career. There are a lot of buckets where that fits in. So a lot of that looks like my standard like Web2 side of my career. So like my masters, my publishing, my touring, and then my on the other side like my NFTs, like the things that I've been doing, like that we've been doing together for the past year and a half or so. And then kind of any future ventures and other exciting things that I have in the pipeline. So just wanted to find a way to be able to, I guess, explore what the alternative would be to like a record deal and try to find some sort of a model where I could treat my career as like a little bit of like a company, right? Where I can hire full-time employees, a full developer to do a lot of the stuff on the Web3 side for me, try to hire people that are, a little bit more on a retainer basis without having to necessarily, give away all of my career, like, 80, 90% of my career for like a small period of time. I just wanted to find a way to like provide exposure for people who wanted a look at basically just me and all the other things that I work on. So yeah, just trying to like find a new model for, how I approach my career.
I love that. And let's break that down a bit. So I know that you've been in the label system before. You've signed a couple distribution deals. You've done releases on different channels. How does something like a seed round compare to some of the other music financial deals that you've been in the past?
I mean, it definitely has its pros and its cons, right? But I think for me, the reason that it made sense is because I've always wanted to like find people that wanted to be involved with me, like in the long haul. Like for me, the thing about the label system, I find like when it gets time to every release is it becomes like a very big like bottleneck of an issue. Like, this very well and like working closely with me is like, we finish a project and then we have to look for a partner and then you have to figure out the deal structures of that partner and then you use the money from that deal to be able to do all the things that you have to do for the given project, right? But I think for something like this, I'm able to scale with people over time in a way that I wouldn't be able to do on a project by project basis. And I'm able to build out a team that I also would not be able to do on a project by project basis. Because let's say like I were to sign a record deal with someone, I would be in that system for X amount of time. I would be assigned a project manager. I would be assigned like X amount of people that are like, I don't really know where I fall on like the priority scale for them. And like, maybe if I start popping, then I have a little bit more attention of a team. But otherwise, it's just like someone like I'm just a name on a desk, right? Whereas something like this is like I'm guaranteed that I have like a team that I guess like kind of the priority for lack of a better way of putting it, and like I think if I'm trying to scale a business, like I should be the priority, for lack of a better way of putting it.
That's
So
right. That's right. And let's go back to the beginning here for people who don't know. So obviously you and I have known each other for a couple of years now. Take me back to the start. When did you move out here to Los Angeles? What's your relationship with music look like? And how did you get to the position of being able to raise the seed round in the first place?
how far back do you want me to go?
Let's go back to Louisville, back to the glory days.
Cool. Yeah, so I grew up in Louisville. I grew up to a couple of immigrant parents from Ukraine. Music was like a part of my life growing up in a lot of ways, but not really in like a supportive way. Like my mom had a PhD in musicology, so she was like a cracked piano player. Like she can play anytime music is put in front of her, like even like right now she can read it. Like she can read it like a language. My dad like grew up playing in cover bands and whatnot, and he like stole some Beatles CDs and brought them back to the Soviet Union and started like playing them as his own. So like they both did a lot of music growing up, but for me, like the way that it entered my life was a little bit interesting. Like in second grade, my brother gave me his iPod Classic, and it had like, he's 15 years older than me, so it was like a very interesting early taste to music. Because on the one hand, I was like playing classical piano and shit, which I was hating, because with classical music, like you have to sit and read off of like a piece of paper, which is, again, it's not like it's a bad thing. It's just it wasn't what would interest me, because like I remember when I was doing like piano recitals and shit, like I would like add page. I didn't know how to read at all. So like I would have like my piano teacher turn the page for me, and I would be like 2 pages late and just playing and riffing and adding like my own bridges and shit. And just like in classical music, that's like the worst thing you can do. Like you have to be exactly, but like you have to like sit up straight, like your fingers have to be perfect and shit like that. So I was doing that, but at the same time, my brother gave me his iPod. It had like LL Cool J and Rakim and Biggie and Tupac and Nas and like a bunch of, and like Lil Wayne and like a bunch of other rappers that were like, Lil Wayne was coming up at the time. It was like past the like Biggie Nas like 90s era and whatnot. But I was listening to all this rap music, and Louisville kind of is it's an interesting place. Have you been before to Louisville?
No.
It's like a very unique vibe. I would say like the closest I can say like LA wise is like Silver Lake, where it's like kind of artsy like in that way, but it's not like, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely like a very unique vibe. I can't really like explain it too much, but it's not like, I think when people think about Kentucky, they think about like horses and cows and shit like that. And I think that's generally true, except for where I'm from. Like, except for like Louisville. It's not like I grew up in like a downtown or had a big downtown to go to. I just like, it's pretty standard, like, you know, middle class, like suburb, you know? But anyways, like I ended up like going to middle school in the projects in this place called Mazik Middle School. And shout out Mazik. And I noticed that there were like a bunch of rappers that were freestyling in between classes all the time. And at the time, I had been listening to a lot of rap music, and I had started listening to a little of electronic music kind of by coincidence, because like Lady Gaga was popping, and I started like getting interested in her production. But anyways, like I noticed that there were people rapping in between classes, and I was like, yo, like where? I just mustered up the courage one day. I was like, because I was a pretty shy kid, I was like, where do you guys record? And they were like, yeah, man, like we don't. And that's kind of where I had the first idea, where I was like, okay, I have an ear for this. I don't know anything technically, like piano skills did not matter at all. But I was like, okay, let me just like, I know that I like this music, so let me just find a way to record you. So I saved up $100. I got a Studio Projects B1 microphone. I still remember I got like the little like blankets and set them up in my closet. And then I started recording people. And that was kind of my first time where I was like, okay, like I want to start being tangentially involved in music, right? And it was like, my initial thoughts were I wanted to be an engineer. And then when I was a freshman in high school, I did that after like a couple years of like kind of just messing around, recording people, just doing anything creative. I was like shooting music videos and stuff too. I decided like that I really wanted to go to Chicago. So my brother flew me out and we went to a recording studio, and I met an engineer, and I like saw like what he was doing, and then came back to Louisville, got a little bit better at recording people. I stopped putting like huge reverbs on every vocal, and was like started to be a little bit more tasteful. And then when I was 16, I stumbled into Lollapalooza just by chance. I was visiting my brother, found out there was a festival, happened to have $200 in my wallet, which was like absurd because I didn't have that much money growing up. And bought a ticket, stumbled into the festival, was super inspired by electronic music. I went by myself. Like I know you've been to a few festivals yourself. Like, have you ever been by yourself to any?
Yeah.
It's a pretty like amazing experience, you know, and, like stone cold sober, you know, just like 16-year-old kid, like running around, like going between stages. I saw Skrillex, I saw Above and Beyond. Like I saw a lot of artists that were like, it just like opened my brain, because a lot of the songs that were on that iPod that my brother gave me, they were electronic songs, but I would always skip over them because I was like, oh, I don't fuck with this. I don't like this at all. And I would like skip, and eventually I knew all the words to all the rap songs, where I started exploring them and just playing them in the background when I was like playing tennis or doing whatever. And then when I went to that festival, I would hear those same songs. Like I heard Above and Beyond play, and I was like, oh, I know this record. I know a thing called Love. Like I've heard this before, but I didn't realize that was the context that it was meant to be heard in. It was like in this like live world, you know? So I came back to Louisville and was like, I'm gonna pivot and just produce, like fuck engineering. Like I'm gonna learn how to actually like make the music. And then that was like very just intimidating, because, you know, I grew up playing tennis, like that was a big part of my life. And that's what I was really like focused on. You know, it was very much like music was like my little secret, you know, because immigrant parents, like, you know, you want to be like a standout kid or whatever, right? Like you could be a doctor or engineer or like a really good athlete or whatever. And I was a pretty good athlete, you know, like I was recruited to play like in college. I played Division I, like I was decent, but it was like, music was always the thing that I would do, and almost like not like hide from my parents because I was having like people coming over, but the way that I was justifying it was like, oh, well, I'm making like $20 an hour, like recording these kids. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But it was something that I always wanted to like, it was something that was always on the side, but something that I always like loved the most. I think it's always really funny now that like music is my job now.
Yeah.
And tennis is like something that I just recently started doing again as a hobby, where like my whole life it was like tennis, 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 like get a scholarship, do the whole thing.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because I think that your relationship with tennis is actually a very good indicator of why you're in a good position to do all the stuff you are with the rest of your business. Talk to me about how big a role that played in your life. Talk to me about going to college to play tennis, and pause on the music side for a second. Like, help people understand how you've instilled this sense of discipline in yourself.
Well, the team, the funny thing about this whole like round thing is that I'm building a team around myself, which is a very new experience for me because tennis is such an individual sport. Like tennis is really weird in the way that if you're having a bad day, and by the way, like I love team, like I'm a huge NBA fan. Like I love watching basketball. I'm a big sports guy in general, but with tennis specifically, it's a very individual sport. And like if you're having a bad day, you can't like pass it to a teammate. You can't like pass the ball to a teammate. You can't like sit down. That's not a knock against other sports. It's just like the way that that tennis works. And like I said, it has its like pros and cons. But for me, like and there's no like shot clock. It's not like 48 minutes are up and then you either win or you lose, or if it's tied you go to overtime. Like and eventually like if you're up by 1 or 2, like it's over. Like in tennis, you either just win or you get destroyed. And if you're losing and you're losing bad, it's not about like sitting out the clock. Like you just have to find a way to get through it. And like for me, it's you don't, and it's I would argue that it's the loneliest sport because you're not able to even like smell or touch or be like around anyone. You know what I mean? Like it's just like you yourself. Like the closest you ever get to like your opponent is like when you guys are like crossing ends to change side. But otherwise, it's just you out there, and it's like, and also coaching is not allowed in tennis. So no one's allowed to like talk to you. Like you have to always be out there and figure out the whole thing yourself. And it's like it's really funny because like I think you're right. For me as a musician, I definitely have my moments where I totally get that I'm like a creative and an artist and like a fucking idiot, But I think that there are a lot of moments and things that I've learned from just like being by myself, like on a tennis court, that kind of make me, I guess, this weird blend of like understanding the business side of things, because that's also like an individual component of like I need to figure out how to do this myself. I need to make a living on my own. Like I need to like a kind of a willingness and a discipline to like figure that out. And then on the other side, it's like, I guess the rebellious side of me, which was the kid that stopped playing tennis, which was the kid that decided to like move to Los Angeles, like with like $100 and 200 peanut butter sandwiches, like, so it's kind of like, it's interesting the way that it's like unfolded itself. But I would say like additionally in terms of just like how I live my day-to-day life, it's also pretty different, I would say, than like I guess like the musician archetype, right?
Tell me about that. What does your daily routine look like?
I mean, it's different, man. In the past, I would say, to be totally candid, in the past like 6 months, it's been a little bit different than it was for like 5 years before that. But I mean, dude, when I was in college, like I didn't go to a single party. Like I've never been to a frat party in my life. Like didn't pledge, didn't do like any of that. I literally, my freshman year of college is when I was playing tennis. And then it was just a very interesting way of living life, because like I would notice that I would be up until like 4 a.m. making music. So this is like the standard, like I guess musician like day in the life. But then I would like have to be up at like 6 a.m. for practice at 7, and then the weight room and all that shit. And so eventually I stopped playing tennis, and I took a year off, and I'll get to the routine thing. It's getting there, but like I took a year off and I lived in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I was a delivery driver at Jimmy John's. I made a deal with my parents. I said, hey, like immigrant mom and dad, like give me a year. Like I'm gonna live by myself. I'm gonna figure something out. If not, I'll come back to school. And I didn't end up making a living in that year, but what I did kind of discover in that year is how far you can really go if you just do nothing else but focus on the thing that you're most passionate about. And so like during that year, I became like an absolute animal. Like I woke up every single day. I woke up at like 4:30 in the morning, and then I would go to the gym, like just like the opposite of what you would think of when you think. It's like, it sounds like a businessman, you know what I mean? It sounds like a CEO of some shit, And like I would wake up, I would go to the gym, and I would be back at like 6 a.m. to start making beats. I would be a delivery driver for like 3-4 hours, make like $100. My rent in Murfreesboro was $375 a month, so like for a bedroom. So I would cover my rent in a week, make music for the rest of the month, and like that was the year where I really started to take music seriously, where I was like, I'm gonna do this every day. I really want to get good at this. I really want to understand like how, like I really started like studying it, and like having a real like understanding of what it was. And I think I had just downloaded Ableton like my freshman year of college, and didn't really like totally understand how to use it, was like kind of staying up late fucking around with it. And then I noticed like kind of 3-4 months into me living in Murfreesboro, I was like starting to make beats that like made sense, because like every single day, like I was producing for like 12 hours a day. Like I wasn't, like, no exaggeration, like that's all I was doing. And I noticed like after 4 months, I was like, I'm getting like I came across like one day I was like just going through like my iTunes folder and I accidentally clicked on like some shitty one that I made when I had first moved there. And I was like, oh, like it kind of was like a light bulb moment where I was like, okay, fuck, like I've gotten a lot better. And the reason I did is because I've just been working every day, but I never expected results on like a day-to-day like level. And that's where like it kind of ties into sports. It's like when it comes to sports and practice, you kind of just have to trust that what you're doing will make sense in like a year, or it will make sense in like 2 to 3 years or 5 years or whatever, right? It's like the Steve Jobs like Stanford speech. I like, it's my favorite speech of all time. But like that's the thing, is like I was like going to the gym, I was like getting in really good shape, and I was also like doing music all the time, and they kind of all tied together for me. Like I remember I put on like 20 pounds going to the gym, and I like became like a pretty strong dude. But from on a day-to-day level, I never like looked better or felt better even, you know? But then after, 6 months, you look back at like the pictures from 6 months before and you're like, wow, like, I look better. You don't really realize it on a day-to-day level. And so in my mind, after that year of me just doing it every day, and then again, always comparing back to kind of, a few months before or a year before, I realized that like the intervals for me were these 3 to 4 months pockets where I really would have a breakthrough and understand that like I've gotten better, but like you have to do those kind of 3 months of everyday producing, and then eventually you'll break through some sort of a wall and figure it out and move on to the next level. And so when I came back to Boston after that year, I was like, wow, in 1 year, like I have gotten okay. Like I've gotten like very like middle of the pack, like average, like at music. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna go back to school because I need a place to live. Like I need housing, but I'm just gonna do music with school on the side instead of school with music on the side. So I took the routine kind of to the next level, where what I did was like, there were a list of 5 things that I did every single day, and I got this from like a podcast, Sky Andy Frizella. And I do 5 things every day, and those things were work out, call my grandma, send 5 emails, learn something new, and work on something new. So the way that it would work is I would wake up at 3:45. From 4 to 5 a.m., I would learn something new, which is like a page in a journal. From 5 to 5:30, I would send 5 cold emails to anyone I could find in the music industry. So I would go to New Music Friday. I was trying to do remixes. I would go to New Music Friday. I'd go to the Facebook About section of that artist on New Music Friday. I would find the email, and I would start sending out cold emails. So I would do that from 5 to 5:30. From 5:30 to 6, I would walk to the gym, call my grandma, right? And then I would work out from like 6 to 7:30. So by 7:30 in the morning, 4 out of my 5 things were done. I was like so in my mind, the hardest part was always the working on music. And I would classify that as I would always try to do 4 hours of music a day, right? But it was like from my athlete life, I suppose, of like having to be like really disciplined when I was in high school, like never really going to too many parties and just like every weekend traveling. It weirdly like carried itself into like my music life, where after living for that year and starting to find the parallels between like how I started to get better at music and like how that compared to me getting better at sports, when I came back to Boston, that was like my entire focus, was like I didn't fuck around with anything or anyone or whatever, and like, didn't live like a very normal college life. But in a lot of ways, I was just like trying to play catch up, because I noticed that there were so many kids who were like 15 years old on SoundCloud, years better than me. You know what I mean? Like absurdly better than me. And so like my entire college career and life just became about playing catch up and like honestly just trying to produce more than anyone else.
So talk to me about when some of those activities started paying off. Like when did those 5 tasks you had in the morning hit? Like did you end up getting a response back on a cold email, or when did things start to actually move?
Well, I mean, the cold email one is, so there are two stories that come to mind. First one is I used to have a different project, and I was really like obsessed with this band called Above and Beyond. And so for a year, my goal was to get on their radio show. And so literally like 1 year, June 28th of 2017 is when I got on their radio show for the first time. Like I listened to their show all the time. I like drove to my best friend's house. We listened to it. And June 28th of 2016 is when I decided to leave Boston. So 1 year on the dot, I was on the radio show from producing every single day. So that's like one story. I think the funny one when it comes to like the cold emails and shit is like cold emails suck, man. Like, but the way that I would do it is like, I really wanted to meet. It was like to artists, it was to managers. It was like, I was literally like making pitches. Like I would send an email every morning just being like, I'm cool. Like, let me work with, like, some of them were like, I'm not even that good, but like, I really want to be,
Yeah.
And the response rate was always the fucking same, dude. It's, 5 emails, 7 days a week, 35 emails, 30 no's, like 3 maybes, and then like 2 yeses. Like that was basically it. And like, but over the year, that's like 100 yeses that like at least like someone will take a call with me or talk to me. And like, I remember one of the best ones, like one of my still favorite ones was this guy Ennis. He was the Chainsmokers' day-to-day manager. I happened to find his email through, like that plus community that we were in like back in the day, like basically just like a Instagram. It was like a Facebook group actually of like a bunch of artists that were kind of bubbling and like trying to like find their footing and whatnot. And I just threw one guy in there. He sent me Ennis's email, and then I emailed Ennis and was like, "Hey man, like, would love to I love the Chainsmokers." Like I literally sent him like a fucking essay. I was like, I love the Chainsmokers. Like just this whole like actually like eloquent pitch on like why I should do a remix for them. And then he responds and he just goes stems below. Like I still remember the email, 2 words. And there was like all lowercase too. Like it's just music industry shit, right? And so I shit my pants, right? Because I'm like, oh, like I really like this is insane. I got the Chainsmokers. Like I saw them at Lollapalooza in 2016, like blah blah blah. So I get the stems for them. I skip class for a week. I make a mix, it was like not that great. Like, but I make a remix and like get it professionally mixed and mastered. And first of all, I didn't have much money growing up, and then you're in college, so I have no money. I found a way to get it mastered, and then I sent it to Ennis. I was like, yo, here's my first pass. And I was like, fuck, what did he say? Oh, okay, yeah. So I was like, yeah, like here's my first pass to it. And then I was like, let me know like whatever needs work, whatever. And he just responds all lowercase, no period. He said needs work, 2 words. And then I responded, I said, is it the mix or is it the arrangement? He responds 1 word, both. And so that was kind of like my entry point to like, okay, I can talk to someone, but I suck. Like I'm just like not that guy. Like I'm just like absolutely not there yet. But I ended up developing a pretty good relationship with Ennis while I was in college. Like he was someone that every time I would drop on SoundCloud, I would send it. I was like, oh, send this to the Chainsmokers. I want them to repost it on SoundCloud. And he was one of the first people that, he started emailing me being like, hey, like Lost Kings need a remix right now. Like, cause they're under Disruptor. Or they were under Disruptor at the time. I don't know what's up with them now or like if they're still on there. But at the time, just even like Call Me Charisma, like other like kind of bubbling acts that Disruptor was looking for, they wanted like kids to just try remixes. And so I didn't care about making money off it at all. Like I was like, I just want someone to know that I'm trying. And it would start hitting me up. And then when I eventually moved to LA in 2020 with no money, I got on a long phone call with Ennis. I was like, dude, I don't know how to make any money. Like, but I'm running, like I have $50. Like, dude, I need to figure something out. And like, Ennis started connecting me to do random one-off jobs. Like I would do like, I literally did like, this artist Evan Gia, she did like this like sweat series for SoundCloud, and I would just mix their stuff together, and I would just like create Ableton mixes. And it was like, I remember I was like 10 mixes for $100 each. I was like, oh my God, I made my first $1,000 like in Ableton, like it was like a big accomplishment for me. But Ennis was one of those first moments where I was like, wow, like this has really, this whole notion of like emailing people, like one person can really start to not change your career entirely, but start to nudge you in the right direction. And like I remember when I met Ennis in person for the first time, it's when I was in college. It's like I told him that I was gonna be in New York because that's where Sony or the Columbia offices are. I told him I was gonna be in New York for sessions, which was bullshit. Like I literally took the $4 bus to Chinatown because I wanted to meet him, and I was like, yeah, man, like I'm gonna be in New York. I'm gonna be doing sessions like all weekend, like such bullshit. Like would love to get lunch. So I'm like I remember this, dude. I pull up to New York. I'm taking the bus, moving into like Port Authority, and our lunch was supposed to be at 3:00. It was gonna be a late lunch, and he was and he texted me, or I didn't have his number. He Instagram DM me. I'm like religiously checking my Instagram DMs, like scrolling up and down, and he was like, "Yo, man, like, can you do lunch at 1:30?" And I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, "It's 1:00. Like, okay, like as long as we get to Port Authority by like 1, it was like 12:30. It's like as long as we get to Port Authority by 1, it's a 2-mile walk. I'll walk over." So it's like 12:45, we start hitting Manhattan traffic. 1:00, not really even that close. 1:15, like we get there, and I like already packed all my shit, ran to the front of the bus, and I'm like, I'm gonna catch an Uber and just like spend the last of my money on this Uber and like get to the office so I can meet this guy. And I kept the Ubers, like it was even worse than the than the foot traffic. So I look down, I'm like wearing fucking jeans. I was wearing skinny jeans, like I don't know, it was a phase. I was wearing skinny jeans and I was wearing black Vans, and I was like, I just have to run. So I ran 2 miles at a 6:30 pace, and I like in jeans with fucking Vans and a backpack, and like a huge fucking jacket, running through New York City, like almost getting hit by like all these cars. I get to the restaurant like 30 seconds before him. I'm like fucking hunched over, like sweating, like can't even fucking breathe. I just get like a tap on my shoulder, and he's like, "Yo, are you good?" That's like the first thing he ever said to me, and I just like look. I was like, "Oh man, like so great to meet you. Like I'm sorry I ran here." Like, and he was like, "What the fuck?" Like it was just like because people in the music industry are like so low key and like chill and shit sometimes, and he was like, "Dude, like what?" So yeah, but anyways, like he was like one of the first people that I guess I made an impression on by doing all that, because like years later he told me like that was something that he remembered. You know what I mean? And he's like someone I talk to maybe like once or twice a year now. It's like low key, you know, we'll like catch up and shit. But like, yeah, that was like one of the first times that someone that I met on a cold email was just like, this kid works hard. I know he didn't tell me this, but I know that he knew that I wasn't there yet, like musically. But he was more like, this kid works really hard, and I believe in that. You know?
And I think that's the through line. I think the one thing I want to pull out here is that if you work hard, just finding one person to believe in you goes such a long way. You know, and I remember the same for my journey. It was like, same as you, cold emailing all these managers, cold emailing people to get stems and whatnot. And I can still remember very vividly who were those people that actually gave you the time of day before anyone believed in you. You know, and that sort of motivation really carries forward. And I guess at this point in the story, we're at roughly 2020, let's call it, right? You're starting to release music on, you know, independent labels like Lowly Palace. You're starting to get on these YouTube channels like Chill Nation, Trap Nation. Talk to me a little bit about that phase of your music career.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. So I moved to LA January of 2020. I found out that there was like a bullshit ass internship that I could do where it's like study abroad in Los Angeles. So I finessed my way into that. But the whole intent was like by the time the summer rolled around, I need to have like a job in music. So like even before that, like in the summers, I was always crashing on people's couches and like trying to find a way to be here. So people were doing internships. I was just living on couches trying to meet people. So when I moved here in January of 2020, I knew like 10 people like in music it wasn't like totally from ground zero, right? And so in that 5 months, I tried to further those relationships from the summers as much as I could, try to find deals, try to find something that was like pay my rent. And by the way, pay my rent was like $1,000 a month. And that wasn't even rent. That's like everything included, like sleeping in my car. Like, I don't care. Like, I just need to be here in some capacity. And like, if I have gas to like, you know, like turn on my car when I'm like sleeping, like I'm fine. You know what I mean? And so for that first like year, I mean, you know, I was in that program January of 2020 to March 2020. COVID happens, shatters me because I'm like, I have this whole plan. I wrote down in 2016, January 1st, 2020, I moved to Los Angeles. I did it 4 years later, right? And then March 2020, like there's a fucking global pandemic and I have to go back home, and it demoralized the shit out of me because of 4 years of just planning, waking up at 3:45, all to go to Los Angeles and then realize that the world falls apart. Like, kind of took me back for like 24 hours. But then I landed in Louisville, back to my parents' basement, you know, couldn't see my parents because they put like foil in the car when they picked me up from the airport, because that's like the height of like, you know, like peak COVID and whatnot.
Yep.
And I go to the basement and I like just go to sleep that night, and I wake up the next day and I was like, I need to go back. Like I need to find some sort of a way to go back. And so I made so much music. Like I would 10 songs a day. Like I was on some absurd shit. Like I felt like I was like taking Adderall or something. Like it was like just like, but it wasn't Adderall. It was like necessity. Like it was like the first feeling of like, I need to figure this out, because I'm like looking at Indeed.com trying to find like actual jobs, which I had never considered like a part of my career. I was like, I can't do this. Like there's absolutely no way that this can happen. And so I was like, there's just not an alternative. So I made all of these songs all the time, made these 3 songs, Insomnia, Peanut Butter, and Stay the Night. And that was the first, sent them to Cloud Kid. That was the first record deal that I got. I don't even remember how much money it was. I think it was like a couple grand or something like that. I don't know. And I just remembered it was like something like enough to like pay my rent for 2 months. And so I May 23rd of 2020, I got a one-way ticket, moved back to Los Angeles with $2,000 in my pocket. Stayed with my friend Heather Sommer, who I had just dropped a record with that March. She moved back to New York for July. And so when I was coming back to LA, I was like, okay, I mean, no one's gonna I can't get a lease anywhere. So I texted her, I was like, hey, do you still have your bedroom? And she was like, don't even worry about paying me. Like, it'll give you a place to stay for a little bit. And so for 2 months, I was living rent free. Again, I was, being a delivery driver, I was doing Instacart. So I was delivering people's groceries and stuff. Which honestly wasn't even that bad. And, July of that month, or July of 2020, rather, a couple months after living rent free, I found an Airbnb with my friend Eldar. There were like Russian fugitives living downstairs. We were splitting a room for $600 each. Like, all utilities were included. The other $400 that I budgeted for myself, made like a whole spreadsheet before I moved to LA that May. The other $400 was like me living off pasta. Never went out, could not afford it. Like, you go out in LA, it's at least $100. Like, that's like a quarter of my monthly living. Would eat like the same exact thing every day. Like I had it mathed out, like oatmeal in the morning, pasta in the evening, chicken in the middle of the day, like always the same. And that was, one of the darker periods of my life, because I never lost hope about like music, but my thoughts of moving to Los Angeles and like what a music career could be drastically altered in that period, because like, to me, like, making music is something that I always did for fun. Like, I think that I was very motivated to be good at it, but it all came from a place of like curiosity and like wanting to like, and wanting to have fun doing it. And in that period for a year, like, it was very much just like, I didn't have much fun, because I was just like, I was mixing and mastering for other people. I was doing like random, like, SoundCloud mixes and shit. And it was cool. Like, I was like paying my rent with Ableton. Like I said, I made $12,000 my first year living here. And, I was doing it all through Ableton, which was a great feeling. Like, it was at that point in time in my brain, I was like, I made it. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, I'm living here, have a roof over my head, and I'm making all my money from Ableton, But at the same time, like, in that process, signing very short-term deals, doing like all the little like one-off random jobs that I could, like, there was not really like much time left for me to like make music that I really love making, and that was definitely felt lost, because I know, like, I was making a lot of friends here, and I noticed that, to be an artist, you just have to already be popping. Like, you need to like have something going for you. So I started taking the route of like, okay, well, I'm decent at producing. Like, on the Daniel Allan front, I'm going to be doing like this pop electronic stuff that I like is a formula that I know can pay my rent at least a little bit and like give me some small deals. And then on the other half, I noticed that, some of my other friends were getting like, like $50,000 for like a publishing deal. And I was like, how do you get a publishing deal? And they were like, well, you just produce for people. And so I ended up doing all these sessions that they were terrible, not because of the other person, because of me.
Yeah.
It was just like, I was making songs that I didn't care about at all. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, it felt like I was an accountant. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it was just like, all right, like 1 4 6 5, like chord progression. Like, what's popping right now? Let's go to Spotify. Let's listen to like 10 songs that are big. Oh, you want this? All right, cool. Let's do it. And it just felt like very mathematical and like sad. It just like wasn't at all why I had done music. And so, from I guess May 2020 to March of 2021, that was my life.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point in the story, because that's when you and I first met and started interacting. I think at that point in time, I started to see you popping up in the plus plus group a little bit more. And I still remember the one thing that stood out to me was just how consistent you were and how hard you were working. And of everyone in that group, you just kept releasing and kept putting out music. And I just knew that you were just going to be consistent with it. I didn't know you as a person at all. I didn't know you as a friend. I was literally just a fan and a follower. And I was just like, yo, this guy's working hard, and I could kind of see it through the lanes. And I remember coming over to that house with Eldar. We were all hanging in the backyard. You popped out for like a second. And I don't think you and I had a real conversation until, Instagram, basically, or until we went on a hike. And I think to just put a pin in the story right now, I think it's easy for people who know you today to look at this announcement that we're talking about and be like, oh, like, Daniel's kind of crushing it in Web3. Obviously, it makes sense that he's doing the seed round, et cetera. But we're talking 5 years before, you even started to get into Web3, that you were doing all these things and hustling. And I think that's really important to pull out, because I think that a lot of people that are new to being an artist, or new to being an artist in Web3 specifically, they kind of expect something because they're in Web3, and I think that for your story, what's so inspiring about it is that your Web3 career, which is a big part of your journey today, didn't start until very deep into the process. And I think that's important to recognize for anyone that's starting today, is that this stuff takes time. And there's going to be a lot of dark points and a lot of points where you want to count yourself out before you really start to see something bubbling and clicking for you.
Yeah, man. I mean, I remember that when I was waking up at 3:45 every morning, like, what I would tell myself, because I got myself out. I wasn't on my phone like in the morning at all. I would like just immediately wake up and start going. And I remember like I would tell myself, like, you're doing this for yourself in 5 years. I would always tell myself that every single morning. Like, I would walk to the gym. It was in fucking Boston, negative 10 degrees, like, walk into the gym. And always I was like cold as shit, just like kind of just trying to walk there. You know, it's like a 2 mile walk to the gym.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're doing this for yourself in 5 years. You're doing this for yourself in 5 years. You're doing this for yourself in 5 years. Like, I would say it over and over and over and over again, you know? And that was, I think that's still how I think about things today to an extent. Like, the reason I probably didn't talk to you when you first came into the backyard, when me and Eldar was living together, was I was like, this isn't going to help me in 5 years. You know, I was just like, me making this remix that I'm making right now, me making this beat right now, like, this is what's going to help me. And like, I think the funny thing about what you mentioned, like, I was always putting shit out, was like, every song was getting better.
Yep.
You know, like, I never, in that era, I don't think that I have a song that I would like play live today per se, but every song I was always making a small improvement.
Facts.
You know? And like, it wasn't from like 0 to Skrillex, you know what I mean? But it was just like from Daniel a month ago to Daniel the next month, you know? And it was always just like slightly better. And like, I wasn't like precious about that process at all. Like, I was kind of basically out there. I remember even with my social media at the time, I didn't give a shit. Like, I was just like posting every single day and whatnot. Even if it was like cringy, I was just like, I'm learning, and you guys see that I'm learning. And if anyone fucks with it, great. And if not, then you're probably not meant to, I guess, be in my like fan group or whatever.
100%. And I think it's a good part of the story, because this is where the whole Web3 genesis kind of comes into play. You talk a lot about this backyard show that you had. For those who haven't heard it, why don't you give a quick unabridged version and talk about sort of your entry into the space?
Does unabridged mean like full version?
Unabridged means like.
Or does it mean like Spark Notes?
Spark Notes.
Okay. Spark Notes, March of 2021 rolls around, and I decided to put a show in my friend's backyard because I wanted to sign a record deal. The reason I wanted to sign a record deal is because I wanted to have fun. Like, I wanted to be able to like have enough money to be able to pay my rent, to be able to do music, like to be able to like actually create art. So I invited every single person in the music industry that I could. Invited publishers, agents, A&Rs. You know, not that many of them showed up. It ended up just being like mostly my friends, you know. But a couple of them came up, and like the show split up into 2 halves. The first half was like On the Bright Side, which is like the first like EP that I put out. I mean, I kind of consider Overstimulated my first EP, but that was like the first one I guess I put it out on Spotify and stuff. And then the back half was like a lot of what ended up being Overstimulated. Like, it was just a lot of like demos that I had sitting around that were like very, I guess, like different from all the pop stuff that I had been working on. It's basically the stuff that like a lot of the labels like that I was working with were like saying no to, but I still really liked, and it was like a sonic direction I was interested in. And so like after the show, a few people came up to me and like, you know, kind of I didn't get like any like record label offers on the spot, but they're like, we want to talk, or like, you know, I remember like Gazzo was like, I'm gonna connect you to someone here. Like, I was like, oh, cool, like encouraging. Like, I get to talk to people. And then you came up to me and you were like, hey, like, I love what you do. Like, that was like, I think probably our first conversation where we like spoke for a little bit. And you were like, I think you said something along the lines of like, if you ever need help with anything, just kind of let me know. Like, it wasn't like about putting out music. It was just like kind of like sending like an olive branch. And so, you know, that next kind of month, I started to see a few like kind of soft offers or thoughts of what an offer would be bubble in my inbox from like some of the other leads that I made like during that night. And I mean, they were just like bad, you know, like it just like didn't accomplish anything that I was trying to accomplish. Like, I felt like I kind of would have been like a hamster, like running on a hamster wheel. And then I didn't have any other options. So you were like my last case like scenario. And I was like, I mean,
That's right, baby.
I was like this huge man came up to me and was like, hey man, like if you need help, let me know. And I was like, well, I need fucking help. So I think that's when I reached out, like I think April of that year.
Yeah. And I'd say, you know, for me, that was really interesting, because that's really when music and Web3 started to even become a thing. You know, like Catalog had just launched, you know, there was people doing drops on Nifty Gateway and Zora, but I remember seeing where you were at in your career, and it just felt so correct to like really explore that, because at that point in time, mind you, when there was people dropping NFTs, it was basically like an artist that you knew by a brand name being like, yo, I need a date on Nifty Gateway, can you connect the dots for me? Yeah. And like, I'm just gonna go make 200 grand and peace off, and I'm never gonna talk to you again. But with you were like, yo, like I'm trying to figure out how to make this like a career. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. And I think that's the first time that I saw the opportunity to work with developing artists and actually figure out how to give them a career that's kind of built in tandem with their Web3, you know, genesis. Like, that was really inspiring to me.
Yeah. I mean, the timing was pretty perfect because I had shitty timing my entire 5 years before that. You know, like everything was wrong. Like, I was never good enough. Like, it was, and you know, every time I tried to explore something, I just realized that it like, I just hated it and it just wasn't for me. And like, I kept going, like always, I always like, you know, I guess like kept knocking on the door. And so like, for me, I was kind of at this crossroads in my career where I was like, do I want to be an artist? Do I want to do like, is this shit where I'm like just making random songs, but I don't like them? Is that what I want to do? Like, what is an artist? Like, what, I don't know what my story is. I don't know like what I'm trying to tell. And I was never like really given that opportunity. And so I was at a crossroads where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to sign these deals because this is just going to fuck me for a long time. I'm just going to try this, you know? And it was very much like a leap of faith, I guess, moment for me where it was like, I'm just going to go all in on this because I've went all in on everything my whole life. So I'm just going to try this. Worst case scenario, I leave this. I'm 26 years old. I was like 20, how old was I? 23 at the time, just turned 24, something like that. And I was like, worst case, I'll leave this 2 years later after trying really hard. I'll be 26. I'll be a baby. I'll start over and I'll figure it out like I did like 4 years ago, you know?
And I think the theme I want to pull out here is that it goes back to what you said in tennis. You know, no one's going to believe in you more than yourself. And I think the consistency with your career is no matter what wall you hit, you know, there's always just this belief that I'm going to figure it out for myself.
Yeah, and it sucks. Like, it definitely sucks sometimes. Like, there's a lot of like, I still have like moments where I'm like, I don't make anything good for like a couple weeks, and then especially all the people around me are, and I think that that's something that really motivates the shit out of me. Is like that when people like younger than me or people around me are like going super crazy, that's when I go into like fucking overdrive. You know what I mean? Because like it inspires the shit out of me to see like other creatives just be better than me. You know, and so like for me, whenever it's not intrinsic, which I think there's always a degree of like, I'm gonna be okay, like I'm gonna figure it out because I'm cool with being broke. I'm cool with having nothing, like it's not a problem for me. You know, like I'm down. But I think whenever I lose touch with like, okay, I haven't made anything good in like 2 or 3 weeks, I like listen to the people around me and like I see what they're doing and I'm like, oh shit, you know, and it kind of just like wakes me up. Because it was the same thing with sports. Like there would be kids that like you don't, you know, they're like not really playing well in tournaments. You never see them and all of a sudden like they beat you or like someone beats you or like you just see them like having a crazy run and you realize that you're slowing down. You know what I mean? And like I always felt that way about when I was growing up was just like, there was this one dude that like for years I'd just destroyed him in tournaments and I was working pretty hard, right? And then he just went into like crazy overdrive mode for like a year, started beating everyone. Then he beat me in a tournament, and I was like, oh fuck this, you know what I mean? Like I took it personally, you know. And I guess it's kind of like in some ways the same with music. Like I'm obviously really happy for like all my friends and all the people around me, but like seeing them succeed and like seeing them do well is also like a reminder that I need to like step my shit up.
Yeah. Well, let's go through the timeline here. So it's April 2021. You sell your first NFT on Catalog. You mentioned Overstimulated being your first quote unquote real EP. Talk to me about what that looked like, both from traditional music and then what it looked like from the Web3 side and how those started to really tie together.
I mean, musically, it was the first project I wanted to show my friends.
Yep.
You know, like whereas like before it was kind of like, there are like my music friends that kind of like know that I'm like hustling and trying to figure it out. And then there are like my friends like from home and like in real life that are kind of like, you know, cheering me on from the sidelines. But I would never show them that shit because I like was kind of not embarrassed of it, but it was just like not fully developed, I suppose. Overstimulated was the first project that I was like, oh, like I get the story behind this. You know what I mean? Like I have an interlude in this, like just small shit like that, like artistic stuff that like made me really, you know, inspired about it. And then like on the Web3 side, like it was the first time that I put out a project that I knew like eyes were on me. You know what I mean? Whereas like everything before that was just like, you know, I'm just gonna throw this into the abyss and hope I get a Spotify playlist. You know what I mean?
And what did eyes on you in Web3 mean at the time? Because this is right around when Sound launched, and I think this is a really pivotal turning point in your Web3 career. Talk to me about sort of the stage around like when you dropped the Overstim crowdfund, when you released Too Close, the Overstim EP on Sound. What was kind of going on in your mind at that time?
Yeah, it was definitely a state of shock, for sure, because I remember like we did let me see, first music NFT was April of 21. I came to you and I was like, I came to you and I was like, I want to be able to do something like bigger. Like I want to be able to like do some sort of like a big project. And then you kind of being like, you're not nearly ready for it. And so I spent that whole summer like meeting people and actually like, you know, trying to understand what all of this shit was. And then September of 21, when we did the Overstim crowdfund, all of a sudden, like every single person that I had ever like spoken to in the music industry, like or followed or like wanted their email or whatever, or had cold emailed in college and not responded, all of a sudden everyone thought I was cool, you know, because I had made a little bit of money. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, man, that was definitely like a turning point in terms of like, okay, like I'm on people's radars, you know?
Right. And so at that point in time too, Sound was just launching. I remember that we had put out Too Close. That was what, the second drop on Sound ever?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that was, the timeline was Overstimulated crowdfund September of that year. Time article November, which that was the first moment that my mom thought I made it. Because my mom, like I was like, hey, have you heard of Time magazine? Like, and she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, I got a page in it. And she was just like, you know, there's no way. Like I remember like I sent her a video and she lost her mind. December Sound starts up. I dropped Too Close with Bloody. And then January was it was like they had like the Genesis like kind of I guess artists, you know, like the first 20 that were on there, and like Too Close was the third song that came out on there. And then January, the Overstimulated, like the full project drops, and that was the first thing. It was like right before season 1 started. That was like the full entire project front to back. And then really I just felt like for the first time in my whole life, like in music, I felt momentum. You know, like just month after month after month after month, I'm like doing all these crazy experiments, right? Like things are starting to work for me, you know? And it was definitely like, that's why I consider like Overstimulated my first EP in a lot of ways, is because it was the first time that like I started to get attention for shit that I really cared about. And even Poison being the biggest song off that, like that song wasn't a single.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Poison was like a song, it was like my personal favorite that I like produced out, because like there were a lot of records that I had like a lot of collaborators on, and obviously DLG is like a fantastic collaborator, but it was just like I did 100% of this record, and I just really felt like, I don't know, proud of it, but it also never felt like a single because it was a really short song. It was just like a chorus and a drop in one verse, you know? But yeah, even like things like that, like I started to have momentum for the first time in my career, and then that was like positive reinforcement, you know? Like that was just like, oh my God, thank God 5 years ago, Daniel is like, actually like people care about. It was never crazy, you know what I mean? But I think the other thing is like on the Web3 side, I had a group of people that were quite literally like helping me make a career. And that was just growing. Like none of them were ever leaving, you know?
Yeah.
So like I kind of started to feel like I had this like group of people that were like following me as you know, like the Forrest Gump scene where he was like walking on like the fucking highway, and then like people just like are following him.
Yeah.
It's kind of what I started to feel. It was like one person at a time, like kind of kept coming in, you know? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think it's interesting to mention this moment because I feel like this is where you started to really separate yourself as an artist in Web3. You know, because at that point in time, just anyone putting out an NFT was novel. You know, if you were an artist who had been around for 5 years, or if you're someone who's never put out a track before, if you were just selling a song as an NFT, it was very cool and it was very new. And then I think there started to be a point where you as an artist individually were setting yourself up at a stage that felt compelling, right? And when Daniel Allan had a drop on Sound or Kyle or whatever it would be, that was kind of a moment. And so I think to kind of help highlight this, you had Overstimulated, the Mirror crowdfund, you had these drop on Sound that went super well. It sold out in the first minute on a Twitter space. And then we had Glasshouse. And I know there's a lot in between those two.
Yeah.
So let's take a second just to pull apart the difference between the Overstimulated project and then the Glasshouse project and some of the learnings in between.
Holy shit. I mean, Overstimulated was something that, so funny, I just haven't thought about it in a minute, but Overstimulated was something that happened like, I made some of those demos in a world where I did not feel accepted. Like it was like, I'm going to make these, no one's going to take them, I'm probably going to drop them independently. Met you, finished the project, and I was kind of like, okay, I have a mechanism to put this out now. Like I wasn't like kind of totally in the dark, but it was kind of like one foot in, one foot out. Glasshouse was the first project that I was like, okay, like I'm going to just do everything Web3 first. Like I did the Daniel Allan and Friends crowdfund on Mirror, raised the money to like get an Airbnb with all of my best friends, like made the entire project. And then by the time we dropped it on my site, that was definitely a moment of like, oh my God, like I really like own a funnel. Like I really like have a group of people, like this huge group of people, because Glasshouse sold out in 24 hours, 1,000 editions at 0.1 ETH at like the beginnings of a pretty nasty, I guess, like bear market. And I did that 100% on my own site. And that was like, that was the first project that start to finish. I started it in January of 2020 is when I like, or January of 2022 is when I made the music. Right? Yeah, 2022 or 2021? 2022, right? Yeah, January of 2022 is when I made the music. July of 2022 is when we did the full crowdfund, or the full drop on my site. And everything from like start to finish was kind of like very like Web3 native. You know, even the artists that I like brought to the camp were artists that were like either had dropped on Sound or like wanted to drop on Sound. Like Bloody White's drop was during our writing camp. Like I remember I like came out like a bottle of champagne and like popped it on him like in his car, and I almost fucking broke his laptop.
I love that. And so Glasshouse ended up being this moment where you started to carve out a name for yourself and almost like a pocket with your collaborators. And I think that's something that was really unique to me, is it was no longer about just Daniel Allan. It was kind of the Daniel Allan ecosystem started to form more, both on the artist side with artists you were collaborating with your partners, whether it be Sound or Bonfire. I think this is where it starts to get really compelling from a company standpoint, because it's no longer just you in your bedroom going on a hike and dropping a song on catalog. There's actually strategy and planning going into this. And so from the outside, you see Glasshouse, 1,000 editions in 24 hours. But what people don't see is the planning and the coordination and all the people involved that went up to making that happen in the first place.
Well, I mean, that's what I mean. To be honest, I started to have those inklings even when I was doing Overstimulated, where I was like, here's a team, here's a community manager, here's like someone who's working on this, like here's like this pocket, right? I think that after Glasshouse, the writing was kind of on the wall because I had just met my manager at the time, and I started to really feel like what a team was. And then a few months after Glasshouse, I had signed with my agent at CAA, which is like a funny story in itself. But after that point, I was like, okay, I have like some sort of a foundation here. I know who fucks with the things that I'm doing. I know who fucks with me and who wants to work with me. But the reality is there's so many resources that I was still missing. Like there were so many things like that, whether it's a major label funnel, like whenever you have a song pop in that they can help move. Like for example, Poison came out and it had, when Poison had a TikTok moment and it was getting like, 10 to 15,000 streams a day, which is good for a song that you release on DistroKid, right? I did not know what to do with that moment because I didn't have anyone on my team that was like, that's what major labels are good for, is they're good for like taking something that's working and making it bigger. I didn't have that. And so when I started thinking about like building out like my career to a bigger level, and I've been very vocal about this, like I care about having like, a big song and big records. Like I wanted to be able to like, okay, I want to be able to hire these people to be able to get something once it's already moving and not have to, spend months figuring it out once the momentum for it dies down.
Right. And so this is the period now in between Glasshouse and Criteria where it was kind of like thinking bigger, right? We kind of proved out with Glasshouse that you can do something on your own. You can do something very, credible, something that feels like a hallmark moment. What was this growth progression between Glasshouse and Criteria where you started to really think about elevating yourself even further when it came to being an artist, specifically within Web3 at the time?
I mean, it's really interesting because I think that I mean, I've always put the music first.
Yep.
Like, I wouldn't do any of this if it didn't mean I weren't making better music. And I feel pretty objectively like Overstimulated to Glasshouse, there was a jump musically. Like, I think Glasshouse, the intro song is like still one of the best things I've ever made. Like in terms of like a sheer like production flex, I would say. I would say when it comes to like Criteria, it's the most diverse musical project. Like when I played Denver the other night, like I played like 5 songs off of it, and like some of them work better in a club, some of them probably work better in like a live festival setting or like whatever it is. And so like that felt like the most diverse project. And I think like every single thing that I've done with like Web3 has just been about me trying to like push my limits and like try to solve problems. Like Overstimulated, my problem was like I don't have any creative freedom and I want to be able to like have fans own a part of the music. So that was Overstimulated. Glasshouse was, okay, I have distribution, like I have my funnel. How can I leverage that to be able to do things on my own, like when I have to? And then Criteria was just a project of like, okay, like I have all of these learnings from the other stuff. Like, we ended up using like sounds, we ended up using Sound and Bonfire to be able to do something that's like similar to Glasshouse and like what Rio did with frameworks, right? But then it was like, okay, the question really, every time after Overstimulated, the question just became scale.
Yep.
And so like how do I scale this? Like what are the next steps for me to do? And after Glasshouse, my question became, how do I do a really, really big Web3 drop that isn't just like, hey, here are 1,000 editions and, thank you. Like
Yeah.
I wanted to create a world where I was like, okay, like when you're doing a drop in Web2, like you are, you're thinking of the creative, you're doing the music video for it, you're doing all of these things, right? And then I wanted to be able to do the same thing with Web3. Like, okay, like what does a full drop look like for me? Like how can I, on Web2 you might do a splice pack. I was like, all right, I'm gonna do a drop with kits, with arpeggi. Like I'm gonna do a music video here. I'm gonna do a rollout with On Cyber, like whatever. And so after Criteria, especially, it was very much like, I don't know how much more I have in me to just kind of do by myself and pay for it out of pocket and like give
Yeah.
people splits on it.
Yeah.
It's like I was like, if I'm trying to go like any bigger with this, like I need to be able to have like a fully dedicated like team and situation, because like this is fucking hard, man. Like, cause like the through line for me like is like getting better at music,
Right.
and it's like if you can't be better, I got better at music by making music all the time.
Right.
You know, like when I was in college, when I was waking up early, like that's the only way that I got good. I have this other side of my career that has made my career, and it has definitely, it is the absolute backbone of my career in Web3. But it takes time, and that's why I've always said that it's not for everyone, right? And so for me, I was basically the only person like doing this, you know, and the writing was on the wall, especially after Criteria. It's like we did 2,500 editions in an hour. I did like 10 fucking activations. I'm done. Like I can't do this by myself anymore. Like I'm gonna burn out and it's gonna be over.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's where I decided to just like, I was like, okay, let's take a step back, really focus on music, which is what I'm doing right now, and like be able to know, like, and have peace of mind in the back of my mind that I have a group of people around me that is like actually like my full-time team that's gonna help me figure the rest of it out.
Right. So I think at this point in time, we're at this phase where you do Criteria, you have this big drop in the space, we all celebrate for a minute, and now we're like, okay, what's next? Because we're kind of in uncharted territory at this point, right? And so I think from here moving forward, how do you think about the next 6 to 12 months of your career, and how do you think that this raise that you've done helps you unlock that potential?
I think my biggest focus is on filling out my buckets. And what I mean by that is my masters, which is having songs that move. Like I think that for Web3 music to like really have a moment, I've always said like there needs to be a breakthrough artist. And I'm trying to put myself in the best position to do that with whatever resources I have now. You know, like if I have to pay for a marketing campaign, I don't want to have to go through a label to do that. Like I want to be able to do that out of the bank account that we all created, you
Right.
know? And I don't want to have any kind of a bottleneck. I don't want to not know where the money goes, which is like what happens in a lot of label situations. Like I want to be able to have full control over everything that's happening, but I want to be able to like speed up the process and not be like, oh, well, you know what? Like you're not moving on TikTok. We're not going to allocate any money to you. Like we're not going to allocate any resources to you. Like I want to be able to do it all like on my own accord, you know, and at my own speed. And so like on the one hand, it's like trying to create a big record, right? Which is like me on the master side. The other is like building out my touring career, right? Which is me doing festivals, me doing bigger shows. And like when I play a festival or when I play a big show, like I want to be able to like immediately have like dope visuals. Like I don't want to be the artist that's just kind of like opening up and like isn't able to go to put a good experience together because they don't have any resources to do it. You know, like it's something that I want to be able to have like all at once, you know? And then on the other side is like, you know, scaling the music NFT side. Like me doing all three of those things in tandem at once, paying for it out of pocket, you know, was like never, it was just, it became very difficult, you know what I
Right.
mean? Because I was always like optimizing for experience, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I wasn't optimizing for like rent, you know? And so like at a certain point, I was just like, okay, these are the three things that I care about, and whatever future ventures, which I do have, like, you know, I have like a few like in the pipeline, right? It's like I'm just trying to think about those things and how to bring them to the next level. And like, I like pushed myself because I know this from sports, like I know this from like where I was at. Like I pushed myself to like the outer edge of like this is as productive as I can be by myself, or like pretty damn close to it. I'm not gonna say it's 100% because you never know. Like you have like an extra gear, but I was pretty damn close to it, and so it just made the most sense for me to do it that way.
And the one thing I want to touch on here is that I've always been so vocal about the Web3 part of your career. You know, I'm the first person to say that music NFTs are the GOAT. You know, when it comes to selling on sound, Daniel Allen's the GOAT. But I think one thing that I really appreciate about your perspective now is that specifically for Criteria, it's not only about doing 2,500 editions on sound. You know, these songs are starting to come out on Spotify now. And I think a big part of this round and this raise is actually figuring out how do you have a better unison between a drop in Web3 and a rollout on Spotify so that there can be more of a relationship between the two records and, you know, the fans of Spotify and the collectors in Web3 and what that looks like in an ideal world.
I think the North Star is for kids to think that it's cool,
Yep.
you know? And I think that kids are not going to think anything is cool unless you find some sort of way to create a through line of like, this is an NFT to this is a dope song without saying this dope song is an NFT, you know? And so like, for me, I'm like, okay, cool. The people who know that I'm dropping NFTs know that I'm cool and that I'm doing cool shit. Everyone else, which is 99.99% of the world, has no fucking idea. And so for me, I'm like, okay, how do I take like that pocket and find a tasteful way to enter them in over here? The only way is by having dope songs that people hear. And
Yeah.
so like I realized that when I gave a talk at Syracuse a few months ago, and there were like college kids that I spoke to. I was like, these are the kids. Like these are the ones that are gonna buy music NFTs for $5 because they're cool. For the same reason that they buy vinyls to put up on their walls.
Yeah.
You know? And so I was like, okay, great. the music NFT side is like a very big part of my career. It's always going to be the backbone. It's what I'm scaling, I think, the quickest.
Yep.
But in terms of top of funnel, I need to focus on this,
Yep.
because this is already, I own this section over here. I know the people that are going to be there. Let me flood more people into this ecosystem. And instead of by doing it with like the biggest NFT drop, which always gets good immediate press, I think that the long-term solution for me has really just like made itself clear, which is increase top of funnel with like as much music as possible and as much like give myself the best at bat using resources to create that opportunity.
And let's play some color to that, because I think that's where this raise really comes full circle. So now that you've done this seed round, you sort of have this money that you've raised to be able to go and allocate and build a team around you. You mentioned going to Syracuse to meet some college students. What does the Daniel Allan team look like over the course of the next year?
It's interesting. I mean, I have my manager, my agent, who are always a part of it. I have my lawyer, right? I think outside of that, I have a community manager, Michael, who's coming on, and he's going to be the person that's going to be helping, like, with my Telegram, helping build those things out. I'm going to bring on like a full-time or part-time developer to help build out my next drop, so that when it comes time for it, I don't necessarily have to rely on someone that's working on like 7 or 8 projects at once. I can kind of be like, hey, you're my guy or girl for the next few months, and like let's kind of go all in on this together. I think I also have like an intern who's doing all my social media stuff because like at the beginning of the year, I asked my agent, I want to see the pitch that you're sending out for me to play festivals, for me to play shows. Because I thought I was going to sign with an agent, immediately play every festival on the planet. At the top of the page, it said reach, and it just said Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and I was like, Twitter, I got Twitter. I'm good at that. Like I can figure it out. That's like where all my Web3 fans live. Let's focus on TikTok and Instagram and actually like start to develop content around myself. So like content, I'm already doing like making music and Web3. Content is a full-time job. It's 100% a full-time job. Like our homie, Caleb Simpson, the apartment guy, like it's a full-time job, and like that's why he's really good at it. And I was like, okay, so I need a full-time person to be doing that. And so for me, like I said, it's really just about like building out a team that buys me back time to be able to make as much music as possible and have everyone else handle the rest.
I love that. And I think that it's a really important point to kind of like come full circle to, because you have these people that are working for you. You're working with younger kids who are looking for opportunity. You have a vision that you want to build towards, and now you have financing to be able to go and do that. I'm not saying it's an infinite amount of money. In fact, $1 million is actually not a lot of money when it comes to building a team. But I think from the investor side of things, the reason why I was so excited about this is, first of all, you and I have been building this relationship for years. It's not like this is just like you discovered an artist on SoundCloud and then throw him a bag tomorrow. It's like this is the result of a long time coming. And I think for someone who's been involved in music for so long, I always ask myself, how can we do this differently? How can you finance this project in a way that feels a little bit untraditional, but more in your control? And especially as we start to build out this ecosystem around you, this idea of being able to have people working for you full time as an artist is fascinating to me. It's not like there's people on your team that are working on 10 different things at once. Everyone shares the same goal of how do we make Daniel Allan as successful as possible. And I think that's something we haven't really seen in music before, and something that I'm really excited for you to explore and hopefully set a precedent for moving forward.
Yeah, man, it's exciting.
It's exciting. And I guess maybe to kind of end on a fun exploratory note, why don't you tell people about where we're recording this podcast at and sort of what's in store for the next year here in LA?
We're recording this podcast at the new house. I'm building a pretty crazy recording studio here. I have 2 of them. I have like a B room for writers when they come in, and then I have an A room, which is like the dream studio. It's like the place that like when I was a kid, I was like, this is exactly what I want. And I mean, the whole point is just to have this place that we live in to be like the cultural hub of like music and music NFTs in general. Like I want people to be in and out of this house to be able to make as much music as possible, hopefully mint it if they want to. But generally I just want it to be like I guess like a creative safe space for people to be in and out of. And so, yeah, man.
That's right. And I guess to add my own 2 cents to it, I feel like we're in such an exciting moment in the industry at large. You have case studies like yourself that are building this out in real time. And for someone like me starting this podcast, I want to be able to tell these stories in authentic as way as possible. The stuff that we're doing, like you said, 99.9% of people do not care and have no clue what's going on, and they think that NFTs are a scam. And I think for me, being able to sit down with someone like you and all these future guests and really help them see what it means to be deeply entrenched in your career and in your movement and everything you're building, it feels like a really special opportunity. So, kind of ended out here. I'd say that I'm really honored to have you as the first guest here, man. I feel like what we're doing is very exciting and hopefully something that we're going to see a lot more of. But in closing, is there anything that you would tell to other artists or people that are looking to this episode for inspiration as sort of a closing word of wisdom?
Hmm. It's an interesting question. I would say there is no like linear career path that you can copy from someone else. I think that you can tailor make a career that is yours, that you can own, that is your unique way of doing things. And I think that as soon as you stop thinking about the way that other people are doing it and thinking about what makes the most sense for you, then you can kind of lose the limits and like kind of the barriers can fall off. And so I would say like to any artist or really like to anyone that's like listening, I'm not sure how qualified I am to give advice on like a broader level. But yeah, like stop worrying about like how other people are like creating a career for themselves. Like I said, I was looking at other artists and other producers and being like, I guess I have to sign a publishing deal. Like knowing that that wasn't what was best for me or what I wanted, and like fortunately I was able to turn it around and find like a path that made a lot of sense for me. And I'm the happiest I've ever been. I'm working on music that I really care about. I'm like working on projects that I think have a lot of historical significance and make a lot of sense and impact people, and so that wouldn't have been possible if I would have, went with the career path that, someone else went with. And so like for me, it's really just like, as long as you're down to work hard, then you can tailor make like whatever career you want for yourself.
I love that. Well, this has been episode 1 of the Invest in Music podcast with Daniel Allan. Daniel, where can people keep up with you after the episode?
I wish I had all my social media like under one name, but on Twitter I'm Daniel Allan, and then on Instagram and TikTok it's Daniel Allan Music, and then I have a Telegram. So if you've ever collected any of my music NFTs, pop in.
Well, thanks for being the first guest, man, and here's to the best year yet.
Let's go. Good shit.
Peace.